Welcome to the Sacred Feminine Power podcast, where we explore the many facets of feminine power and why it is so important for women and for men to step into this power in our world at this time. This is Emmy from Feminine Revered, and I am super excited to introduce today's guest, Sally Berg. Sally is a mature facilitator of female embodiment spaces and is leading the menopausal pleasure revolution. In her 60th year, she has just launched an online business, Mature Eros, to support women through perimenopause and beyond by cultivating pleasure and eros in their bodies to reset the nervous system out of stress and into ease. She has journeyed deep into the underworld on her own healing and blossoming journey from childhood sexual abuse and adult sexual freeze. She's now rising like the phoenix in the flames, living her best, most juicy, creative, and sensual life ever. Sally, it is such a blessing to have you with us. I cannot wait to see where our conversation takes us. Welcome.
Thank you, Emmy. I am beyond excited and delighted to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. It is such an honor to have you with us. And Sally, since the podcast is called Sacred Feminine Power, I love to start by asking my guests, what does sacred feminine power mean to you personally?
Well, sacred feminine power for me has been the biggest revelation of my life, I think. And what it means to me is becoming more embodied from the ground up, of practicing becoming more in my own pleasure and power from the inside out. So opening my heart, practicing fierce boundaries, and becoming more from my back body rather than that thrusting forwards in the world. So creating what I call like a soft power. And it's about coming out of my head and into my body and trusting my body wisdom, and doing this through ritual and ceremony, and really revering and honoring my cycles as a woman. And obviously now I'm in post-menopause, but continuing with rituals that honor the earth and the moon and the seasons.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've opened a couple of very juicy portals there with your response
Mhm.
already. And I have a feeling we're going to dive a lot deeper into a couple of those concepts in just a moment. But Sally, I would love for you to share a little bit about your own journey, especially in terms of a challenge that has really helped you to activate that sacred feminine power within you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can think of two, but I'll speak mostly into one. But interestingly for me, the opportunities and portals to really activate my deep feminine wisdom has been either through illness or trauma. And it's usually when my body speaks to me in a big way. Like I was quite seriously depressed for 5 years after the birth of my second child. And I realized that my childhood trauma was trapped in my body and I
Mm.
couldn't talk it away. So that led me on a beautiful journey into practicing Tantra and conscious dance. But later on, the one that I really want to speak about was this incredible dive into the underworld and this sort of mythical journey, like Inanna, when she goes into the underworld and is hung on the meat hook. And I feel like as particularly as female bodied beings, we have these incredible challenges, and we kind of reach a crossroads of like, do we choose to really dive deeply into this, or do we numb out and avoid it? And in my lived experience, the powerful changes come when we really dive deep, when we dive deep into the matter of the earth, of our bodies. And so for me, the big one was 2 years ago in 2023 when I'd been living in South Africa for 20 years, had a beautiful life, raised two sons. And as we were about to move back to the UK, it was the end of my 35-year marriage to a man I still believed I was going to grow old with. Um, and at that time, everything changed. So it was the end of a very long marriage. I had to move countries. I moved to a town that I'd never been to in my life. I literally chose it with my witchy instinct. and was also holding my younger son through some quite serious mental health issues. So it really was a heroine's journey of note. And this, this dive into the underworld really just stripped me to the bone. But fortunately, because I'd already been doing a lot of deep work, inner work, and tantric work for many, many years, my body wisdom said, it's okay. This is what's meant to be happening. Trust the process. And yeah, it was absolutely fucking awful, like brutal beyond belief. I think back and think, and I really had to dig deep. Um, but I'm very grateful for all of the deep feminine embodiment practices that have become like a daily ritual for me that really shored me up to have the capacity to hold myself and to hold others through this huge life transition. And I think as well, there's a piece around the heart that I always love to honor, which is about courage, which, so many women have so much courage, so many different life experiences. And in French, the translation for courage is the rage du cœur, so the rage of the heart. And I just love that because it's like this raging heart, and, raging as in passionate and full and open, not raging as in crazy. Um, so for me, my raging heart is what's helped me through this time, because the more we have the courage to keep cracking our heart open, and for our hearts to break again and again and again. I know, that's been my journey of noticing that the more that I allowed my heart to break, then the more gold could come in. It's sort of it's contrary to what we're taught and believe, that, to, put your big girl pants on and buck up and push through. It's actually by opening and surrendering to the seeming chaos and the mystery of what life is bringing us or what's coming at us that is actually can be our biggest strength, and our biggest it can bring the most magic for these challenging times.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, couldn't agree with you more on all that you shared there. And thank you for opening up about your journey as well. I know when speakers share deeply and vulnerably like that, they provide a whole lot of medicine for our audience as well. And you mentioned that there was a lot of gold in the cracking open of the heart, no matter how painful that process in and of itself can often be. Would you share a little bit more about the gold or the blessing that started to come through for you when you went through this experience?
Yes, of course, I'd love to. I think one of the biggest blessings is that from my childhood experiences with a bipolar alcoholic father and sexual abuse and a lot of violence, um, what I started to understand in my adult life is that had meant my body became very armored and protected.
Mm.
And so my healing journey was about feeling more, not less. And so I think the blessings and the gold are when we can have the courage to feel all of it. Because what I've learned is that if I can't feel the depths of my despair, I can't feel the heights of my ecstasy. So it's like it's full spectrum living. So often we're living in this amount of feeling because we're coping, we're just coping, we're getting by. And I think that's what is often in the mainstream narrative of, like, stay safe, keep yourself small, diminish yourself, don't feel too much, don't be too loud. Um, Whereas what I've learned is the opposite is true, that the more we can feel everything from down there to up here, the more expansive and blissful our life becomes, and the more quickly we can move through really challenging times. I know now that if I really give myself, if I have a day when I'm like, shit, I feel really awful today, and there's a lot of grief coming, grief particularly because in Western culture it's not it's not welcome to express grief by
Mm.
yourself or publicly. So if I give myself to my grief, if I really give it some space and sit at my altar and just allow the tears to come without even any sort of narrative or story, but just give myself to grief, then I sort of pop through quite quickly, and then I'm like, oh, okay. And it's like this, it's that deep feminine wisdom of our bodies, knowing that our bodies are really grateful
Mm.
when we give our bodies space to feel what needs to be felt. Giving it space and room means that we can, because as women, we're like the weather. We're one minute we're a storm, the next minute we're calm. So, it's this we move like this, and we move in spirals. We're not linear creatures. So the more we can give ourselves to these kind of movements and these kind of emotions, then yeah, the more I find it, I have a lot more energy and vibrancy when I'm really honoring my feelings.
That's beautiful. Such an important point to make. And I love how you already started to show us some of those cyclical round circular movements that are so deeply embedded in that feminine consciousness. And as you say, so often repressed in the way we've been brought up or the kinds of things we've been told along our journeys. Now, you
Yes.
talked about feminine embodiment practices overall. I understand that dance is one of those for you. Could you share a little bit more about those practices and how they're supporting you?
Yes, I'd love to. I suppose, my journey with those practices started about 15 years ago. As I said, when was coming out of 5 years of quite serious depression and started to understand this trauma was trapped in my body, and that I had to move it out. It wasn't going to just
Mm.
come out on its own. And that's what led me to Tantra. I had the great blessing of working with Shakti Malan, who was the most amazing tantric teacher in South Africa. And I journeyed with her for about 10 years. And I would honestly say that those practices and working with Shakti literally saved my life. I was at a very, very low point. And so, what I was learning with her was yes, how to get into my feminine body, how to sort of sink deep into my hips and the spiraling movements, like in my pelvic bowl, to learn how to start speaking and communing with my womb, with my pussy, to learn what they wanted to say to me after years of just numbing out and not taking any notice. And that journey then of doing these practices. And what's beautiful about them, I think, is that it's very much about repeating the movements. I'd say that I've done thousands of hours of tantric workshops and retreats, but it's often very similar practices. And for me, there's something about building a body memory of these practices. I notice it when I step onto a conscious dance floor now. I step onto that floor and I just drop, like my body goes, ah, yes. And it's the same with the embodiment practices. My body knows them well. So there's like, it's very easy for me to now drop into these practices and for them to work their magic. And it's very much about doing them regularly.
Mm.
Every day I'll do my embodiment practices. And I also have a beautiful altar that is like a living organic being that I commune with, and it's like in devotion to the goddesses like Isis that I work with, to owl spirit, but also to me, in devotion to me and my body, and this sort of reciprocal honoring, and these living life as ceremony, really, and bringing ritual in, whether it's going to the woods. I was often like pull some of my hair out and just wrap it around a bit of an oak tree and say thank you to the tree, do a little exchange. And nature responds to that. The birds will come. I'll suddenly see a buzzard was circling above me this morning, and it's about this sort of expanding out and noticing the magic in nature around us, and weaving it into our lives. And that's the feminine way of weaving in the magic and the cycles and the seasons. And there's so much power in that. And the more you practice it and the more magic you create, that the more magic happens. It's like this sort of beautiful fountain, and like creating like a virtuous circle over a vicious cycle. It's yeah, very beautiful.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, virtuous circle around a vicious cycle. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I love how you're literally lighting up when you're talking about this. I can see how truly embodied it is within your cellular memory, your DNA, and all of you. It's really beautiful to listen and watch you talk about that as well. But
thank you.
yeah, absolutely. But let's talk about mature Eros. In the introduction, I mentioned that you've just launched a new business called Mature Eros. And tell us all about it. What is it for? Who is it for? And why is it here?
My favorite subject. Well, yes, mature Eros is something that I'm extremely passionate about as a mature woman, turning 60 this year. And, what I feel like my life's purpose is about now is reframing the narrative around aging, particularly for women in Western culture. We've been conditioned by patriarchal conditioning and patterning for millennia to think that we're on a trajectory to becoming a dried up old bag, that we're going to be invisibilized, marginalized. We live in a youth obsessed culture um, that reveres youth and youthful looks. And, it's totally counter to how many of the wise indigenous cultures who have elders who are honored for their wisdom, for their what my friend Carly calls QBL, which is qualified by life.
Yes.
And that's so important. But in Western culture, we become elderly, not an elder. And that's a very
Mm.
different flavor. Elderly implies that, oh, shame, you're getting old and you're just going to have to like become small and get a sensible haircut and wear elasticated waisted trousers. And, I'm saying, fuck that shit. What the world really needs right now, as we know, as the world is burning because it's been run by, patriarchal clowns for so long, is it needs embodied, mature female leadership. So I really want to support mature women to become more embodied, more open-hearted, more confident, and doing that through pleasure, because a turned on woman is the revolution that the world needs. When a woman is in her turn on, she's like unstoppable. And this pleasure and eros that's cultivated in the body in my mature eros practices, it keeps your sexual life force flowing through your body, and that brings creativity and vibrancy and aliveness. Um, that means that women can stay feeling juicy and sensual and amazing until they drop dead. I always say, my plan hopefully is to drop dead at a ripe old age on an ecstatic dance floor, or of a multiple orgasm, or preferably both.
There's something to strive for sure.
Yeah, I'm calling it in. So yes, so mature. I literally got a download when I went to Egypt last October from the goddess Isis. I was there on a co-creating a tantric retreat for female facilitators with some other women, and it was just very clear. I just got this sign. She was just like told me who I am, what I belong to, and what I'm meant to do, and that included the name. It was just like mature Eros. Boom. My
Wow.
logo, I just drew it like this. And I came home and just wrote like this. And so for 6 months, I've been like downloading everything. And the content is basically, I sort of call it Sal's greatest hits, because it's like, a harvesting of all the amazing practices and self-inquiry work that has really worked for me, that has meant that I've transitioned through also 7 years of sexual freeze. Literally 2 years ago, as my marriage was ending, I was like, oh, well, I'm 57. I'm just going to have to give up. I'm never going to have sex again. That's it. That's the end of my sexuality. And but there's so much sadness and shame about that as well, because I thought, it's because it's not just about having sex. This sexual life force is like, yeah, it is our energy and it is our life force. And so, fortunately, yeah, I had this big Kundalini awakening at a tantric retreat just over a year ago, and it has been like rocket fuel for life, and it has brought me so much magic. And I'm just like, I want every woman of 60 to feel like I do, to be living their best lives and to be having an amazing new chapter, because it's totally possible. It's totally possible to bust all the myths about, women aging and being parked off. It's not true.
No, on the contrary. I mean, that's when women really step into their greatest power, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And but it's quite, and I feel what I'm excited about is, we live in extraordinary times of great change and transformation. And, for me, as female body beings, if we can cultivate this pleasure in our bodies and what I call pleasure activism, and a deep bow to Adrienne Marie Brown, who wrote an amazing book of the same name. But, I feel like this age is all about transitioning into pleasure activism. When I was in South Africa, I did a lot of social and community activism, working as an ally with the marginalized communities. Out on the streets, rah rah, and that's sort of age appropriate for the younger ones, right? We need that, great. And I feel like for the maturer females, particularly, cultivating pleasure activism is it's sort of, for me, it's an answer to the question of like, how do we respond to the world burning around us? We have very little control about what's happening, but what we do have control about is our own bodies. So how do we create the safety in our own nervous systems and the pleasure, so that we have the capacity to hold ourselves and to hold others? Because if we keep getting pulled into the drama and the anxiety and the stress and collapsing into the suffering, then we're actually no good to anyone. So there's, people might often say, how can you be talking about pleasure when the world is burning? It's like, well, how can we not? Because it's
Mhm.
only by being in pleasure and having a nervous system that is, resilient and ready to hold things, can we then think, okay, I've got the energy to go and clean a river this weekend, or I can actually go and do something. I can go and work in my local soup kitchen. But if we're like collapsing into exhaustion and like, oh my God, the world's going to shit,
Mm.
then yeah, we can't respond, right?
Yeah, so very true. Yeah, that old saying of needing to fill our own cups first before serving others is becoming more and more true, I find, as we move forward in this crazy, wonderful, beautiful world of ours. And I
Yeah.
love what you said there around, body autonomy, body sovereignty, and how crucially important that is. I mean, what we saw over the past 4.5, 5 years or so in terms of the global coercion around, I don't even want to go into it, but the pandemic and so on really drove it home how important it is for every one of us, and especially as women who have been suppressed and silenced for so long, and our bodies have been exploited in so many ways for so long, to really be in that power and, as you said earlier, descend into that body wisdom.
Absolutely.
Mm,
Yeah.
beautiful. Well, Sally, if our listeners wanted to find out more about you and perhaps start working with you as well, what is the easiest place for them to go to?
Well, I would invite anyone who's interested to have a look at my website, which you'll probably share the details, but that's www.mature-eros.com. And I'm also on Instagram at mature.eros. So that's the best way to find me. And I have a beautiful free gift for everyone today, or female body beings. Sorry, guys. So it's specifically for female body beings, and it's called the Golden Nectar Meditation. And it's a really beautiful invitation to really drop into our hips and our pelvic bowl and our pussy and to cultivate a beautiful golden nectar that then moves into our hearts. And so by joining that, you come onto my mailing list, and I have lots of beautiful offerings coming up, self-guided courses, everything's online at the moment. So I will also offer containers with me. And in the future, I really want to also hold live workshops and retreats. So watch this space. I'm going large, mature Eros.
Awesome. I can't wait to witness your rise and your revolution that you're really putting on at the moment. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else that's coming through for you that you feel would be important to share with our audience?
I think I just want to say that this piece around pleasure activism is not gender based either. That's not just for the female body beings. I know that's my area of specialization, but I feel like, for men too, it's very stressful times for them also. And so for them to also consider, embodiment and pleasure activation in their bodies is a beautiful way for them to hold the stress and to hold themselves and others. So yeah, I just would encourage everyone to consider what pleasure means to them. And just in my practices, I've got something I call love bites, and these are like little nibbles of pleasure. So I think that's what I would want to share with everyone, is to say that, you don't have to be sitting meditating for 2 hours a day to cultivate pleasure and create space and ease in your nervous system. What I find very effective are little micro practices, these love bites. So, just literally go out and look at the clouds for a few minutes, lie on the grass for a few minutes, put your face in a rose for a few minutes, stroke your dog or cat for a few minutes, put your hands on your heart for a few minutes, dance in the kitchen. Always dancing. Dancing's great medicine. You're making the lunchboxes dance, you're doing the washing up dance. Just weave little bits of magic and embodiment into your day and make it playful. That sort of that playful piece I feel is really important in challenging times to make things fun.
I
Yeah.
love that. Love bites. That is such a beautiful way of putting it. Great. Well, Sally, thank you so much for coming on to the show and sharing your wisdom and inspiration with us. And as I said, I cannot wait to see what's going to be coming through in the next coming weeks and months, and can't wait to do the meditation as well that you're sharing with us. So really
Yeah.
appreciate you and your courage and all that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmy. I really appreciate it. It's been beautiful to be here. Thank you.
Oh, bless you. Thank you so much. Now, everybody, just for a moment, let's just focus on this beautiful, powerful energy that's being activated during our chat. And imagine sending that energy to everyone and everything on our planet to remember that we are all truly one. And that the more of us have the courage to step into our sacred feminine power and into our pleasure activism, as Sally says, the more quickly our planet will also heal and ascend. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening.